The Third Battle of Kharkov was a series of battles on the Eastern Front of World War II, undertaken by the German Army Group South against the Red Army, around the city of Kharkov between the 19th of February and the 15th of March 1943, known to the Germans as the Donetsk Campaign, and to the Soviets as the Donbass and Kharkov operations. The German counterstrike led to the destruction of approximately 52 Soviet divisions and the recapture of the cities of Kharkov and Belgorod. As the German Sixth Army was encircled in Stalingrad, the Red Army undertook a series of wider attacks against the rest of Army Group South. These culminated on the 2nd of January 1943 when the Soviets launched Operation Star and Operation Gallop, which between January and early February broke German defenses and led to the Soviet recapture of Kharkov, Belgorod, Kursk, as well as Voroshilov-Grad and Izium. The Soviet victories caused participating Soviet units to overextend themselves. Freed on the 2nd of February by the surrender of the German Sixth Army, the Red Army's Central Front turned its attention west and on the 25th of February expanded its offensive against both Army Group South and Army Group Center. Months of continuous operations, however, had taken a heavy toll on the Soviets and some divisions were reduced to 1,000–2,000 combat-effective soldiers. On the 19th of February, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein launched his Kharkov counterstrike, using the fresh SS Panzer Corps and two Panzer armies. The Wehrmacht, while under strength, managed to flank, encircle, and defeat the Red Army's armored spearheads south of Kharkov. This enabled von Manstein to renew his offensive against the city of Kharkov proper on the 7th of March. Despite orders to encircle Kharkov from the north, the SS Panzer Corps instead decided to directly engage Kharkov on the 11th of March. This led to 4 days of house-to-house fighting before Kharkov was recaptured by the 1st SS Panzer Division on the 15th of March. The Germans recaptured Belgorod 2 days later, creating the salient which in July 1943 would lead to the Battle of Kursk. The German offensive cost the Red Army an estimated 90,000 casualties. The house-to-house fighting in Kharkov was also particularly bloody for the German SS Panzer Corps, which had approximately 4,300 men killed and wounded by the time operations ended in mid-March. Background: at the start of 1943, the German Wehrmacht faced a crisis as Soviet forces encircled and reduced the German Sixth Army at Stalingrad and expanded their winter campaign towards the Don River. On the 2nd of February 1943, the Sixth Army's commanding officers surrendered, and an estimated 90,000 men were captured by the Red Army. Total German losses at the Battle of Stalingrad, excluding prisoners, were between 120,000 and 150,000. Throughout 1942, German casualties totaled around 1.9 million personnel, and by the start of 1943 the Wehrmacht was around 470,000 men below full strength on the Eastern Front. At the beginning of Operation Barbarossa, the Wehrmacht was equipped with around 3,300 tanks. By the 23rd of January, only 495 tanks, mostly of older types, remained operational along the entire length of the Soviet-German front. As the forces of the Don Front were destroying the German forces in Stalingrad, the Red Army's command ordered the Soviet forces to conduct a new offensive, which encompassed the entire southern wing of the Soviet-German front from Voronezh to Rostov. On the 2nd of February, the Red Army launched Operation Star, threatening to recapture the cities of Belgorod, Kharkov and Kursk. A Soviet drive, spearheaded by 4 Tank Corps organized under Lieutenant General Markian Popov, pierced the German front by crossing the Donets River and pressing into the German rear. On the 15th of February, 2 fresh Soviet Tank Corps threatened the city of Zaporizhzhia on the Dnieper River. which controlled the last major road to Rostov and housed the headquarters of Army Group South and Luftflotte 4. Despite Hitler's orders to hold the city, Kharkov was abandoned by German forces and the city was recaptured by the Red Army on 16 February. Hitler immediately flew to von Manstein's headquarters at Zaporizhzhia. Von Manstein informed him that an immediate counterattack on Kharkov would be fruitless, but that he could successfully attack the overextended Soviet flank with his 5th Panzer Corps, and recapture the city later. On 19 February, Soviet armored units broke through the German lines and approached the city. In view of the worsening situation, Hitler gave Manstein operational freedom. When Hitler departed, the Soviets were only some 30 kilometers away from the airfield. In conjunction with Operation Star, the Soviets also launched Operation Gallop south of Star, pushing the Germans away from the Donets, taking Voroshillovgrad and Izium, worsening the German situation further. By this time Stavka believed it could decide the war in the southwest Russian SFSR and eastern Ukrainian SSR, expecting total victory. The surrender of the German 6th Army at Stalingrad freed 6 Soviet armies, under the command of Konstantin Rokossovsky, which were refitted and reinforced by the 2nd Tank Army and the 70th Army. These forces were repositioned between the junction of German army groups center and south. Known to the Soviets as the Kharkov and Donbass operations, the offensive sought to surround and destroy German forces in the Ural salient, cross the Desna River and surround and destroy German Army Group Center. Originally planned to begin between 12 to 15 February, deployment problems forced Stavka to push the start date back to the 25th of February. Meanwhile, the Soviet 60th Army pushed the German 2nd Army's 4th Panzer Division away from Kursk, while the Soviet 13th Army forced the 2nd Panzer Army to turn on its flank. This opened a 60 km breach between these two German forces, shortly to be exploited by Rokossovsky's offensive. While the Soviet 14th and 48th Armies attacked the 2nd Panzer Army's right flank, making minor gains, Rokossovsky launched his offensive on the 25th of February, breaking through German lines and threatening to surround and cut off the German 2nd Panzer Army and the 2nd Army to the south. However, unexpected German resistance began to slow the operation considerably, offering Rokossovsky only limited gains on the left flank of his attack and in the center. Elsewhere, the Soviet 2nd Tank Army had successfully penetrated 160 kilometers of the German rear, along the left flank of the Soviet offensive, increasing the length of the army's flank by an estimated 100 kilometers. While the Soviet offensive continued, Field Marshal von Manstein was able to put the SS Panzer Corps, now reinforced by the 3rd SS Panzer Division, under the command of the 4th Panzer Army. While Hitler agreed to release 7 understrength Panzer and motorized divisions for the impending counter-offensive, the 4th Air Fleet, under the command of Field Marshal Wolfram von Richthofen, was able to regroup and increase the amount of daily sorties from an average of 250 in January to 1,000 in February, providing German forces strategic air superiority. On the 20th of February, the Red Army was perilously close to Zaporizhzhia, signaling the beginning of the German counterattack, known to the Germans as the Donetsk Campaign. Comparison of forces. Between the 13th of January and the 3rd of April 1943, an estimated 500,000 Red Army soldiers took part in what was known as the Voronezh Kharkov offensive. In all, an estimated 6,100,000 Soviet soldiers were committed to the area, with another 659,000 out of action with wounds. In comparison, the Germans could account for 2,200,000 personnel on the Eastern Front, with another 100,000 deployed in Norway. As a result, the Soviets deployed around twice as many personnel as the Wehrmacht in early February. However, as a result of their overextension and the casualties they had taken during their offensive, at the beginning of Manstein's counterattack the Germans could achieve a tactical superiority in numbers, including the number of tanks present. For example, Manstein's 350 tanks outnumbered Soviet armor almost 7-1 at the point of contact. German forces at the time of the counterattack, Manstein could count on the 4th Panzer Army, composed of 48th Panzer Corps, the SS Panzer Corps and the 1st Panzer Army, with the XL and 57th Panzer Corps. The 48th Panzer Corps was composed of the 6th, 11th and 17th Panzer Divisions, while the SS Panzer Corps was organized with the 1st SS, 2nd SS and 3rd SS Panzer Division. In early February, the combined strength of the SS Panzer Corps was an estimated 20,000 soldiers. The 4th Panzer Army and the 1st Panzer Army were situated south of the Red Army's bulge into German lines, with the 1st Panzer Army to the east of the 4th Panzer Army. The SS Panzer Corps was deployed along the northern edge of the bulge, on the northern front of Army Group South. The Germans were able to amass around 70,000 men against the 210,000 Red Army soldiers. The German Wehrmacht was under strength, especially after continuous operations between June 1942 and February 1943, to the point where Hitler appointed a committee made up of Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, Martin Bormann and Hans Lammers, to recruit 800,000 new able-bodied men, half of whom would come from non-essential industries. However, the effects of this recruitment were not seen until around May 1943, when the German armed forces were at their highest strength since the beginning of the war, with 9.5 million personnel. By the start of 1943, Germany's armored forces had sustained heavy casualties. It was unusual for a panzer division to field more than 100 tanks, and most averaged only 70 to 80 serviceable tanks at any given time. After the fighting around Kharkov, Heinz Guderian embarked on a program to bring Germany's mechanized forces up to strength. Despite his efforts, a German panzer division could only count on an estimated 10,000–11,000 personnel, out of an authorized strength of 13,000–17,000. Only by June did a panzer division begin to field between 100 to 130 tanks each. SS divisions were normally in better shape, with an estimated 150 tanks, a battalion of self-propelled assault guns and enough half-tracks to motorize most of its infantry and reconnaissance soldiers, and these had an authorized strength of an estimated 19,000 personnel. At this time, the bulk of Germany's armor was still composed of Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs. Although the 2nd SS Panzer Division had been outfitted with a number of Tiger I tanks, the 4th Panzer Army was commanded by General Hermann Hoth, while the 1st Panzer Army fell under the leadership of General Eberhard von Mackensen. The 6th, 11th and 17th Panzer Divisions were commanded by Generals Walther von Hunnersdorf, Hermann Bork and Fridolin von Senger and Detterlin, respectively. The SS Panzer Corps was commanded by General Paul Hauser, who also had the 3rd SS Panzer Division under his command. Red Army. Since the beginning of the Red Army's exploitation of Germany's Army Group South's defenses in late January and early February, the fronts involved included the Bryansk, Voronezh and Southwestern fronts. These were under the command of Generals M. A. Reiter, Philip Galikoff and Nikolai Vatutin, respectively. On the 25th of February, Marshal Rokossovsky's Central Front also joined the battle. These were positioned in such a way that Reuter's Bryansk Front was on the northern flank of Army Group South, while Voronezh was directly opposite of Kursk, and the Southwestern Front was located opposite their opponents. Central Front was deployed between the Bryansk and Voronezh fronts, to exploit the success of both of these Soviet units, which had created a gap in the defenses of the German 2nd Panzer Army. This involved an estimated 500,000 soldiers. while around 346,000 personnel were involved in the defense of Kharkov after the beginning of the German counterstroke. Like their German counterparts, Soviet divisions were also seriously under strength. For example, divisions in the 40th Army averaged 3,500–4,000 men each, while the 69th Army fielded some divisions which could only count on 1,000–1,500 soldiers. Some divisions had as little as 20 to 50 mortars to provide fire support. This shortage in manpower and equipment led Vatutin's southwestern front to request over 19,000 soldiers and 300 tanks, while it was noted that the Voronezh front had only received 1,600 replacements since the beginning of operations in 1943. By the time Manstein launched his counter-offensive, the Voronezh front had lost so much manpower and had overextended itself to the point where it could no longer offer assistance to the southwestern front. South of it,